A cup of coffee, a slice of toast, and perhaps a little fruit can look like a perfectly respectable breakfast. After 65, however, that meal may be sending the body a surprisingly incomplete message. The problem is not that coffee is poisonous or that toast suddenly becomes dangerous on your 65th birthday. The problem is what this familiar breakfast fails to ask your tissues to do. Most people judge breakfast by hunger. If the stomach feels quiet, they assume the meal worked. I judge it by a different question. What biological machinery did that meal switch on? That distinction matters because aging rarely begins as one dramatic failure. It often begins as a collection of small systems receiving signals that are just a little too weak, a little too late, or missing altogether. One of those signals helps determine whether the body spends the day protecting its functional reserve or quietly borrowing from it. You do not see that reserve in the mirror at first. You notice it when a shopping bag feels heavier, stairs demand more attention, or getting up from the floor becomes a planned operation. These changes are often blamed on age, as though age itself were a force pulling strength out of the body. But age changes the rules. It does not make the outcome automatic. The hidden question is whether your first meal gives older muscle enough information to begin repair, or merely enough calories to stop the stomach from complaining. That is why a breakfast can be filling and still be biologically quiet. It can raise blood sugar, deliver energy, and yet barely disturb the machinery that protects muscle. Before I show you the missing signal, we need to understand why muscle after 65 behaves differently from muscle at 35. Muscle is usually discussed as though it were decoration or a tool for athletes. In reality, it is one of the largest metabolic organs in the body, and one of the most useful reserves you carry into later life. It stores glucose after meals, supports circulation when you walk, protects joints by absorbing force, and gives you the power to recover balance before a small stumble becomes a fall. It also stores amino acids, the raw materials the body may need during illness, injury, or a period when appetite disappears. That is why two people of the same age can respond very differently to the same week in bed. One returns to normal, the other discovers that standing and walking no longer feel automatic. The difference is not simply willpower. It is often the size and quality of the reserve available before the interruption began. Aging tends to reduce muscle mass, but the more important loss is often power. The ability to produce force quickly enough when a chair, stair, curb, or slippery floor demands it. Power can decline before ordinary daily strength tests look alarming. The body may still perform a movement, but it does so with less margin for error. This is why I prefer the phrase functional reserve. It includes muscle, nerve recruitment, balance, and the energy systems that let them cooperate when life asks for more than the minimum. Breakfast matters because every night creates a long period without incoming amino acids. Morning is the first opportunity to stop that fast and provide material for repair. Yet in many older adults, breakfast is the meal with the least protein, and dinner carries most of the day's supply. That pattern creates a long, quiet stretch when muscle receives very little construction material. Young muscle responds strongly to a modest rise in amino acids. Older muscle often needs a clearer combined signal from protein and contraction before the same repair machinery responds. Scientists call this anabolic resistance. The word sounds dramatic, but it simply means that the signal-to-response relationship has changed. Imagine a doorbell that once rang with a light touch, but now requires a firmer press. The bell is not broken. The old signal is no longer sufficient. Inside muscle cells, amino acids and mechanical tension converge on pathways that regulate protein synthesis. One of the best known is the mTORC1 signaling network. Leucine, an essential amino acid, acts as part of that nutritional signal. It does not build muscle alone, but it helps announce that the necessary materials have arrived. The other essential amino acids still have to be present. A foreman can start the work, but construction stops if the bricks never reach the site. Movement supplies a second message. When a muscle contracts against meaningful resistance, it tells the body which tissue needs reinforcement. Protein supplies materials, contraction supplies direction. Together they create a stronger reason for the body to maintain tissue that is still being used. This explains why merely adding calories does not solve the problem. Calories can fill the fuel tank without telling the body which machinery should be preserved. It also explains why a tiny amount of protein may look nutritious on a label, yet produce only a modest response in older muscle. If this kind of biological explanation helps you make better decisions, subscribe to Feynman's Body Code, and tell me your age and country in the comments. I want to see where this curious classroom has reached. Now look at the first clue in your own kitchen. Write down what you ate this morning. Then estimate how much of it was a genuine protein source rather than bread, cereal, juice, or coffee. Many people discover that their breakfast contains more protein language than actual protein. A splash of milk and a thin layer of peanut butter. Sounds substantial, but may add up to very little. The second clue is appetite. Older adults often feel less hungry in the morning, so the meal becomes smaller precisely when a stronger signal may be useful. The third clue is convenience. Protein-rich foods often require opening, mixing, heating, or planning, while toast and coffee can appear in 2 minutes. The fourth clue is tradition. Many breakfasts were designed to provide cheap energy for a working day, not to solve anabolic resistance in a 70-year-old body. None of this means breakfast must be enormous. The aim is not to force food into someone who feels ill or has no appetite. The aim is to make the first meal more biologically deliberate, so each bite carries more useful material instead of simply adding volume. And this brings us to the food in the competitor's promise, the egg. Eggs are useful, but the reason is more interesting than the slogan. An egg is not a longevity pill. It is a compact package of high-quality protein, essential amino acids, leucine, choline vitamins, and fat-soluble nutrients. One large egg provides roughly 6 to 7 grams of protein. 2 eggs, therefore, provide about 12 to 14 grams, which is useful but often not a complete breakfast protein target for an older adult. That detail is where many dramatic claims fall apart. Eating eggs can improve a weak breakfast, but 2 eggs do not automatically overcome every cause of muscle loss. They cannot replace resistance exercise, adequate total food, treatment of disease, sleep, or the nerve signals required to recruit muscle. They also do not guarantee a longer life. Longevity is shaped by smoking, blood pressure, physical activity, infection, genetics, medical care, social connection, and chance. But eggs can become part of a stronger morning signal when they are paired with enough total protein and a body that is asked to use it. For one person, that may mean eggs with Greek yogurt. For another, eggs with cottage cheese, beans, fish, tofu, or a protein-rich milk. The point is not to worship one food. The point is to assemble enough essential amino acids in a practical meal that you can repeat. Whole eggs also provide choline, which supports cell membranes and acetylcholine production. That is useful biology, but it still does not turn breakfast into a miracle. For most people, dietary cholesterol is only one part of blood cholesterol regulation, yet individual responses and medical histories differ. If your clinician has given you a specific plan for familial hypercholesterolemia, kidney disease, diabetes, swallowing problems, or another condition, that plan outranks any general breakfast formula. The missing habit is not simply eating eggs. It is creating a reliable morning muscle maintenance signal, enough high-quality protein, followed by a small demand on the muscles that need protecting. Think of it as a 2-part code. The meal says materials are available. The movement says these materials have a destination. Without enough material, contraction asks for repairs the body cannot fully supply. Without contraction, the material arrives with less information about where adaptation is needed. This is why the exact food matters less than the completed signal. Eggs can participate, but so can dairy, fish, poultry, soy, legumes, or carefully combined plant foods. Protein quality refers partly to essential amino acid content and digestibility. Animal proteins and soy are generally dense sources, while some plant meals need larger portions or combinations. Total daily intake matters greatly. Research on whether perfectly even distribution across meals is superior remains mixed, so breakfast should not be presented as a magical metabolic window. Still, improving a protein-poor breakfast is a practical way to raise total intake without forcing an enormous dinner, especially when appetite fades later in the day. It also creates another chance to stimulate muscle protein synthesis instead of asking one evening meal to carry the entire day. For many healthy older adults, expert groups discuss a daily protein range around 1 to 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight, sometimes more during illness or training under professional guidance. That is a population guideline, not a personal prescription. Kidney function, body size, appetite, medications, disease, and total energy intake all change the appropriate number. A useful meal level starting point, often discussed for older adults, is roughly 25 to 35 grams of high quality protein, but the right amount depends on body size and the rest of the day. A small person with 3 balanced meals and a large person recovering from illness should not be handed the same number as though bodies were identical containers. The easiest method is to build a protein anchor first and then add the rest of breakfast around it. 2 eggs alone may be a good beginning. Add a cup of Greek yogurt and the meal becomes much closer to a robust protein event. Or combine 1 or 2 eggs with cottage cheese, a glass of high-protein milk, or leftover fish or chicken if savory food appeals to you. A plant-based version might use tofu scramble with soy milk, or beans with a complementary protein source, and a portion large enough to deliver adequate essential amino acids. Oatmeal is nutritious, but ordinary oatmeal by itself is usually not a strong protein anchor. It can become one when prepared with protein-rich milk, yogurt, or another deliberate source. Peanut butter adds protein, but its calories rise faster than its protein. It is better treated as a supporting food than the entire structure. The label can help. Look at grams of protein per serving, then check whether the serving resembles the amount you actually eat. This small calculation is more useful than guessing from words like healthy, natural, fortified, or high energy. The second half of the signal does not require a gym at 7 in the morning. It requires safe muscular effort that is noticeable enough to recruit tissue. For some people, 5 controlled chair stands after breakfast are a meaningful beginning. For others, it may be wall push-ups, supported calf raises, or carrying groceries later in the morning. The movement should match your balance, joints, heart condition, and current ability. Pain, dizziness, chest pressure, or unusual breathlessness are reasons to stop and get appropriate advice. A leisurely walk is excellent for circulation and glucose control, but walking does not challenge every major muscle through a large enough force range. That is why older adults are generally advised to include muscle strengthening work, not only aerobic activity. Mechanical tension makes muscle more responsive to amino acids. In practical language, use tells the body that this tissue is expensive but necessary. Unused tissue is costly to maintain. The body is always negotiating between what it needs today and what it can afford to keep for tomorrow. A small, repeatable challenge changes that negotiation. It gives the nervous system practice and gives muscle a reason to retain contractile machinery. The best movement is not the most impressive one. It is the one that is safe, progressive, and repeated often enough for the body to recognize a pattern. Protein and movement therefore operate like a delivery and a work order, arriving close enough together to support the same repair cycle. Now the larger picture becomes visible. Protecting muscle does more than preserve the appearance of the arms and legs. After a meal, skeletal muscle is a major destination for glucose. More active muscle gives insulin a larger working surface on which to move fuel out of the bloodstream. This does not make muscle a cure for diabetes, but it helps explain why strength work and adequate protein can support metabolic health. Muscle contractions also assist venous return, especially in the legs. The calf acts as a pump that helps move blood upward against gravity. Strong hip and leg muscles provide braking force when the body sways. They create time for the brain and balance organs to correct position. Muscle protects bone by loading it. Bone responds to mechanical demand, so a completely unloaded skeleton receives less reason to maintain strength. Adequate strength also changes behavior. People who trust their legs are more likely to leave the house, carry objects, visit others, and remain engaged with life. That behavioral loop matters. Movement preserves capacity, and preserved capacity makes more movement possible. The opposite loop is equally real. Weakness encourages avoidance. Avoidance reduces demand, and reduced demand accelerates weakness. A serious breakfast habit is valuable because it can support the positive loop every day before motivation and appetite are spent elsewhere. Another reason this signal is missed is the desire to lose weight. Many older adults cut breakfast first because it seems like an easy place to remove calories. Weight may fall, but the scale cannot tell you whether the loss came from fat, water, or muscle. During energy restriction, insufficient protein and absent resistance exercise make it easier to lose lean tissue along with fat that can produce a smaller body with less strength, lower glucose disposal capacity, and a smaller reserve for illness. The goal after 65 is rarely weight loss at any price. It is improved body composition while protecting function. A protein-anchored breakfast can help satiety, but its deeper value is that it makes muscle protection part of the weight plan. The movement signal is equally important because it tells the body that muscle is not available for casual disposal. Rapid unplanned weight loss is different. It can signal illness, medication effects, depression, dental problems, or difficulty obtaining and preparing food. If weight is falling without intention, the answer is not simply more eggs. The cause deserves attention. This is the recurring lesson. A habit works only when it addresses the correct system, and the person using it is medically able to apply it. You can test the practical value of this idea without pretending it is a 30-year guarantee. Use 7 mornings as a controlled personal experiment. On the first day, record your normal breakfast, its approximate protein content, and how easily you rise from a chair before lunch. Also note hunger at 10 or 11, energy stability, and whether you reach for a sweet snack before midday. For the next 6 mornings, create a protein anchor appropriate for your health plan and appetite. Aim for a meaningful protein serving rather than a token garnish. Use the label and ordinary arithmetic instead of relying on the appearance of the plate. Then add a brief safe muscle demand. Chair stands, wall push-ups, calf raises, resistance bands, or another movement already approved for you. Keep the rest of the morning reasonably similar. A test becomes difficult to interpret if breakfast, sleep, medication timing, and activity all change at once. By day 7, compare appetite, steadiness, chair rise ease, and the total amount of protein you reached across the entire day. Do not expect visible new muscle in a week. The early result is whether the habit is practical, tolerable, and capable of improving the signals you can control. Longer changes in strength and body composition require repeated weeks, progressive resistance, adequate energy, and recovery. The first mistake is adding protein without examining total intake. A shake on top of an already adequate diet may add calories without solving the real problem. The second is choosing collagen as the main muscle-building protein. Collagen can serve other purposes, but it is relatively poor in essential amino acids for stimulating muscle protein synthesis. The third is treating protein as permission to stop moving. Nutrition cannot imitate the mechanical signal of contraction. The fourth is turning breakfast into a contest. More is not always better, especially when kidney function, appetite, or total calories impose limits. The fifth is changing everything at once. A complicated routine usually collapses before biology has time to respond. The sixth is ignoring chewing or swallowing difficulty. Soft eggs, yogurt, cottage cheese, tofu, or medically appropriate drinks may be easier ways to deliver protein. The seventh is assuming expensive powder is required. Ordinary food can often build the signal perfectly well. The eighth is copying another person's portion. Body size, health, medications, activity, and goals are not transferable by photograph. The ninth is looking only at the scale track function. Chair rise, stair confidence, carrying ability, walking pace, and recovery after effort. The 10th is expecting one food to cancel smoking, inactivity, uncontrolled blood pressure, poor sleep, or inadequate medical care. A useful framework has 4 parts: a protein anchor, a plant component, enough energy for your needs, and a safe movement cue. The protein anchor might be eggs plus yogurt, cottage cheese with fruit,